Jade, tell us a little bit about what you do and what's a normal day for you.
Okay, so I'm Jade. So my specialty is ISIS cybersecurity and cyber warfare capabilities, right? I primarily do infiltration, exploitation operations. So I run sources inside pretty much all of ISIS's cyber domain, which means I can pretty much access most information within you sometimes read articles, right? And they say, oh, ISIS is up to this, right? And that's mostly just journalists on Telegram that are like, we receive this information on the channels because that's what somebody put out, right? So I'm fortunate enough to be in the position where I have the ability to influence what is in those channels. I have the ability to influence who's behind those channels, and get to know kind of what they're up to. And a lot of it, is social engineering. So, I deal primarily with hackers. Because, cybersecurity, cyber warfare, right? You're going to go for the most hardcore mujahideen hackers that you can find. And they're pretty difficult to get to. But a lot of it is just talking to people, right? So it's the ability to have a conversation with anybody. And I speak a couple languages, and that's pretty useful.
I'm sorry, couple? You speak 5 languages. You speak English, Mandarin, Arabic, Indonesian, and Vietnamese. A couple of languages.
And pretty much that just allows, thank you. But that pretty much just allows me to communicate, right? That's why I learned the languages to begin with. I'm not a linguist. I don't pretend to be a linguist. I just like talking to people. And that's pretty much what you have to do, right? You can be the most capable hacker in the world, but you're not gonna have the kind of access that I have unless you also have the people skills to go with it. And with that, you need the language skills. And that goes as much for learning formal Arabic or formal Indonesian or formal Mandarin as it does learning frat house Arabic, right? So Arabic and English, and you're talking with your bros, right? Because that's how they're not going to catch on to you. That's how they're not going to figure out that you're a Kufar spy. They're kind of to mess them up.
So in addition to your language skills, what makes you a great hunter, ISIS hunter? You talked about the frat house Arabic, or how do you do that? How do you infiltrate these groups?
Well, first of all, thank you for telling me that I'm a great ISIS hunter. That's definitely not something that I would characterize myself as. Let's see. So I went to law school. And when I was in law school, I did, law reform. And after I got out of law school, I did law reform. And I worked for the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Administrative Law Reform in Vietnam. And when I was there, obviously, we were trying to help them transition from a command economy to a capitalist economy, right? But it takes a while because it's very bureaucratic, and you just have to wait. So we were doing this on and off for a little over 2 years. And about a year and a half after, we started, they were being extremely slow. And then my boss was like, you know what? While we're waiting, we're going to put you in white-collar crime, all right? So because I speak Asiatic languages, I was able to work with all of the Asia-Pacific region, right? So we were tracking down, these guys committing these crimes and trying to figure it out. And DOJ, there's this one case, the very first case that I worked on, right? So DOJ was working on it for 9 months. They couldn't figure out some of the things that they were looking for. So they passed it to PricewaterhouseCoopers, who worked on it for 6 more months. They had a little more luck, but not really, right? So then it was passed to us, and it was kind of like a Hail Mary pass, right? And I figured it out in 4 days, right? So it's one of those things where you're just kind of lucky, and you think it's really cool. Because I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Come on. I'm 21, right? And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to hunt the bad guys, right? I'm going to catch them, and it's going to be awesome. And, they never got the money back that they were looking for, but they got the answers that they were seeking. And that was kind of, I apply the same skills to doing what I do in, within the ISIS cyber domain.
So break it down to us who are not that, initiated. How do you what is the process of tracking down ISIS? What apps or platforms are you using? How do you gain their confidence, or how do you social engineer them?
They used to be really active on Twitter, right? Everybody knows that. Then they migrated to Telegram. And keep in mind, they move apps, like they decide to try out new apps every 3 days or so, right? And they're like, this is awesome, we're gonna recommend this. And then it turns out, oh, this doesn't work that well, so everybody stopped using this, right? But one of the other apps that they have stuck with primarily is Telegram. And so, I sort of cruise around Telegram. And what I did initially when I first started, right, I studied ISIS InfoSec, like nobody's business, for months. I can honestly say I probably know a lot more about ISIS InfoSec than everybody in ISIS, or primarily, I really know a lot, right? But the thing is, because it's so dynamic, it changes. Like I said, every 3 days, they're gonna, or less, maybe a little bit more depending on what it is. But the platforms that they use, hardware, software, what they encourage people to learn, I studied all of it. And when I finally got to started having conversations with these guys, they'll try to trip you up. Like first you have to get through their counterintelligence. Which people who are actually in counterintelligence, like it's laughable. It's laughable. But the way that most of these guys work, they won't make it through, right? So they say, who will vouch for you? Well, some guy down the street, right? Well, you've already failed. You're naming people. They will find out where that person lives. Therefore, they know where you live, right? They don't want somebody like that in their organization. I mean, they're not Al-Qaeda, but they're also not complete morons at the management level. So it's a lot of BSing. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's a lot of BSing. But the thing is, if you're in these channels for long enough, particularly the ones that are chats, eventually, people will start messaging you, and you get to know them. They start to trust you. Then you're invited to these other things, et cetera, et cetera. And you just sort of work your way up. It's not rocket science. I'm not claiming that I have, special magical powers. It's just the way things work, right? And these guys, I know how they think. I mean, they're millennials. I'm a millennial. We're kind of on the same page. Yeah.
So I turned to my staff to get some questions for you. And this is actually from my dear colleague, Frank Conkle, who says, in his own language, how well is ISIS doing online? Are we winning? How are they sophisticated? You seem to think that they're, just a bunch of frat boys mostly.
So I guess that my answer would have multiple parts, right? The first, are we winning? And obviously I'm a little bit biased, not gonna lie. Hell yes, we're winning.
Hell yes, we're winning.
I do joke about kind of the ineptitude of the vast majority of these guys, right? Some of them have no idea what they're talking about. Some of them don't know what they're doing. They'll drop their VPN, and I will find out exactly where they are, right? Other people will, do certain things, and I get control of their computer. Other people, we had this recently. This guy who's in charge of an online operation. He and I are pretty close. I'm one of his, he considers me one of his best friends, right? And, right before an operation, shockingly, his entire, computer went down. So he was not able to participate, unfortunately.
So you have a guy who's with ISIS who considers you one of his BFFs.
Well, and he's not the only one, right? Because that's what I was saying before about, like, you become close with them. You're talking to them all day long. You find out what's going on in their lives. You find out, what time they wake up, what time they go to sleep, what time, how observant they are to prayer. You can find out so much stuff if you just pay attention to what people are saying, right? I'm not gonna go in there and be like, how do I make hijra, and how am I gonna go blow up, certain thing? No. Like, if you do that, they're gonna say, okay, this person's a whack job, right? I mean, anyone would do that. Like, they're still human. They might be terrorists, but they're human, right? So you talk to them, and you gain their trust, and that's how you progress through the organizations. And, there's multiple organizations in their cyber domain. It's not just the cyber caliphate. You have all these little groups. And I do my best to become friends with, people, and sometimes you can only get to other people through the people that you know, right? And they're not going to let anyone who they don't trust completely to these, to those groups. The vast majority of these guys are knuckleheads, right? Some of them have, a little bit of skill. They can do certain things. The people that I try to get to are the people who are hardcore and have sophisticated technical skills. The guys who are trying to hack into Google. The guys who are trying to hack into various government databases, right? I would not underestimate them. Right? I don't think that they're as sophisticated as sometimes the media plays them out to be, but they're certainly not as idiotic as some people seem to think that they are. Like, their techniques are not super advanced, right? But some of them have very sophisticated skills. And, it's a matter of, okay, today, somebody will say, okay, guess what? We're hacking Google. Okay. I'm sitting there like, okay, what are we going to do now? So if you ever see, stories about them kind of veering off or, getting into some kind of like comic incident, know that it's not necessarily representative of their skills.
And so I follow you on Twitter, and I've seen screenshots of these guys. Like, they mess up. I mean, it's almost like a comedy of errors. And I don't speak Arabic, but I can, put together the pieces of what's going on in this conversation, and sometimes it's laughable.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's what I try to, the things that I put on my Twitter, like, they're not going to compromise me in any way. But sometimes people get so scared about the terrorist threats, right? All you hear is like ISIS, and then you're like, these guys can attack blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, but the vast majority of the day, like, either things are totally banal, or I'm like in tears laughing because it's so ridiculous. Some of the things that they say, that those are the kinds of things that they don't threaten anything for me to show people at all, except that it kind of calms them down, and maybe they don't think that ISIS is as big of a threat as sometimes they're made out to be.
We have a question.
Hi, Jane. My name's Daryl Owens, National Security Advisor for Senator Pat Toomey. Thanks for being here today. It's great to see one of the big cyber warriors in person here actually leading the fight to ISIS. So the question I have for you, what's the biggest obstacle you face, and what is the one thing you wish you could change?
It's a really difficult question because I guess I don't look at the obstacles, right? Like, I like feeding off of the challenges. So you say, this person is really difficult to get to. Right, I'm gonna get to them. I think probably the biggest obstacle that I think is the public perception, right? So it's people who get so afraid of these terrorists, right, that they turn all Muslims into the enemy, right? And then it pops up again on these channels and in these conversations that, the United States views Muslims as as an enemy. And in reality, that's, in my opinion, not true at all. But it feeds them, and it feeds not only their propaganda, but the way that they interact with people. And also, I don't want to say a lot, but some of the people that I interact with are US citizens, okay? And, they tell me of the harassment that they've received in school, right? And the treatment that they've received from their teachers, and the isolation from their peers. And for them, it's a lot of times they're not so interested in the jihad element. They're interested in having a cause because they're already an outsider. So for me, it's not an easy problem to fix, but it's certainly the most glaring, and that's, I don't know how you fix that.
Okay, so what I want to know, if you can talk to this about, like, what is your persona online? And I'm going to take a question that Aliyah Sternstein, our cyber reporter, asked me to ask you. Like, how do you shut up ISIS on the internet without curbing internet freedom?
Can I answer that one first?
Of course.
Okay. The answer is that I don't, right? I want to get as much information from them as possible. I don't want to shut them up at all. Like, I want to encourage what they have to say, because the more that they have to say, the more I can learn from them. And sort of figure out how to take them down. So I'm not on I don't want to say I'm not on the propaganda side, because I am involved in their propaganda operations. But for the most part, I'm not interested in curbing what they have to say. Because if I were in the chat with these guys, right, and these guys are hardcore, they're not going to change their views, they would be like, you're out. Like, I wouldn't even make it to that group if I were, saying, oh, we need to curb what you're saying. No, I'm not gonna, So I'm not. I want to know as much as possible. And luckily, I asked them a lot of questions, and they're very gracious to answer.
So what are you shutting down, if not?
That's Aaliyah.
Yeah, oh hi, that was my question.
Yeah. What am I shutting down?
So you want them to talk, but then at what point how do you make them shut up?
Right, so that's not my area. So the areas that I stop them from doing what they're doing is when they're about to attack something that, they should, or do something that they shouldn't be doing, right? So I get a lot of information from, various people. Oh, I want to blow up my school, right? So that's pretty interesting, right? But it's a lot from, oh, I kind of want to blow up my school, ha ha ha, to I want to blow up my school. This is how I'm going to do it. This is who I'm going to go through to get the materials to blow it up. And I know some of those guys as well. That's the point that I shut them up, right? And the thing is, like, if all of a sudden, if people started shutting down as soon as somebody told me something illegal that they're doing, I wouldn't make it through a day, because all of a sudden everybody would be shut down and I'd be the only one left standing. So it's only when things kind of reach a tipping point where I can't deter them by kind of shutting down their computer temporarily, or taking control of whatever, or just letting them lead me to more important people. I don't want to say more important, but essentially that's what it is.
Hey, so my question for you is, have you noticed, it came out in the media last week that Cybercom is waging cyber war against ISIS. Have you noticed that there's been greater OPSEC, and has it made your job any more difficult?
It's a really good question as well. So recently, some people, depending on where they are, have been having more difficulty maintaining internet connection. So whether that has to do with what Cybercom, NSA, or whoever is doing, or whether it's just that's what's going on in that country right now, I can't really say. But I will also say, like I said, I have the ability to influence certain information that's going out, right? So OPSEC, InfoSec, certain things. So would I say that it's really tremendously changing things? No, I wouldn't. Would I say that people are more sensitive to it? Sure. But at the end of the day, none of these guys can stand up to Cybercom or NSA. None of them. My hope is that they actually get all the guys who aren't necessarily in the caliphate, right? Because some of the guys, increasingly ISIS has been pulling their mujahideen off of the battlefield and pushing them into cybersecurity hacking, encouraging them to learn programming languages and kind of gain up their skills by going into apprentice programs and things like that. So, I mean, I hope things change, but if not, honestly, hopefully, eventually I end up in the government or at a think tank in something, counterterrorism, cybersecurity related. But for now, I really like the thrill of the chase, so I'm pretty happy.
Very nice.
I'd also like to take a moment to thank Amazon Web Services and Intel for supporting this event this evening. Without them, we would not be able to host them, so we're really pleased that they've done that for us tonight. And they'd like to continue the conversation at their summit. They have AWS as a public sector summit on June 20th and 21st, so please look out for information about that and continue the conversation tonight here.